Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Well, the sounds aggressive. They sound like they're challenging each other, maybe over some food we left out. At first we thought it might have been directed at us, but again, well, let me say first of all, Al Berry, an investigative reporter that we allowed to come into this camp to do an investigation, recorded the sound you're going to hear right now. He's passed away last January, but he's responsible for a lot of the studies we have done on the sounds through the University of Wyoming and different areas. And anyway, without his input and without his involvement, I wouldn't be with you today.
Yes.
I was just one of the hunters that was up there. There were 6 of us involved, and we were all capturing these sounds with tape recordings. Well, exactly. I don't usually say, but it was in the Sierra Nevada mountains between Lake Tahoe and Yosemite. Well, there's a lot of wilderness there. Well, from the distance where we can drive, it's about an 8-mile trek in there, a pretty imposing trek, really, to get there. And the conditions, well, we recorded them over several different times, so we was involved with a family of these things that were coming around our camp, and grossly underestimated what they were at the time, and was capturing, the only thing we could capture was their sounds. We couldn't capture pictures many times as we tried. They just seemed very elusive, and they are very elusive. But,
yeah, that's been noticed.
Yeah, a lot of people wonder why. But anyway, I underestimated grossly what we were involved in at the time. I thought it was just a unique thing, and we was kind of having fun with it. But Al Berry was really trying to figure out if anybody could have been hoaxing us up there. Because, oh, there are. Yeah, well, there has to be a real dollar bill somewhere to be a counterfeit, I guess. Oh, he did. Well, first of all, to get there and to know when we was going to be there was a question he had to ask. But he was looking for anything other than the tracks they were leaving, trying to find any evidence whatsoever. We didn't know at the time that he was really going through our backpacks. He was looking for wires. He was looking for anything he could find that would suggest a hoax or somebody pulling our leg. And when he had them studied by the University of Wyoming, well, that kind of took out a lot of the doubt because they discovered there was no 60-cycle hum in the recordings, which would have suggested they'd been pre-recorded, re-recorded. They talk really rapid, really fast. These things do, and well, when you hear the sounds, they're talking, and we kind of knew that, but we didn't have a professional telling us that, and that's what you have to have nowadays is something behind your name, like a PhD or something, to get it qualified, and so that people believe, well, okay, that's real now. Well, we kind of knew they were talking to each other. They were trying to say something to us. Later on, at the time in 1971 when this started, Al Berry didn't go in until 72, and he captured some recordings, which are the ones you'll hear now, and they were very clear, and those are the ones that the University of Wyoming studied. But it wasn't until 1974 when we really started interacting with them, and something that sounded like they were slowing down their rapid-fire chatter into something maybe we could understand. Don't know what they were trying to say, but a cryptolinguist has uncovered language in that, and he does have the qualifications to do that. He's retired from the Navy as a cryptolinguist from 20 years studying these, how to decipher codes and
is his
language.
Can you say his name?
Scott Nelson.
Oh, Scott Nelson, right. You said that earlier. I'm sorry.
He'll actually be speaking with me in Georgia in January. And him and I spoke together quite a bit because his programs shows how he deciphered the language and the qualifications he has to do this stuff. And so it's quite compelling, and it's quite exciting, really. It's been a big part of my life.
Well, yeah, because
40 years. Well, we're inside a shelter, which we jerry-rigged around a group of trees with cables and deadfall, and I have a picture of that in my book, and we have a top over it, but in the top of it, Al Berry punched a hole so he could get his head up through there and try to see what was making the sounds, and every time he'd pop up, the sound would stop, and the Johnson brothers, who was in camp that night, too, they walked up, and we were trying to interact with them. We kind of felt, after a year or so of these sounds going on, that they weren't going to hurt us. They weren't as aggressive as they sound. They're really, it's like a big dog barking at you, but he never bites.
Yeah.
These things were not trying to hurt us. So we felt a little bit of security there, and we was able to walk out, but every time we walk out towards where the sounds were, they would stop. And it's dark. Generally, it's right after dark when all this took place. A lot of times there's a bright moonlight, and the camp is 8,400 feet in elevation, so it's quite bright up there when the moon is shining.
Yeah.
But Al Berry was up with an infrared camera and all kinds of whatever he could take up there at the time. This was in the 70s, by the way, so
yeah.
Obviously we didn't have the technology that's available today, but he was trying to capture something that was making the sounds. And although we've seen them, Al Berry never got to get a glimpse of them. He lived quite a distance away, and he didn't go up there nearly as often as all of us did. And we got to capture glimpses of them occasionally, but nothing defining that you could really say, other than they were 8 to 10 foot tall. Ha ha ha. There's a good question.
That's a good one, isn't it?
I have no idea. Well, I have my ideas, but
yeah, sure. Give us a few ideas.
Well, they could either be what a lot of scientists that I went to Russia last year and spoke over there at the Darwin Museum with a couple of professors, and I think their thinking is they could be a remnant of the Gigantopithecus, which they think went extinct in Asia, but maybe they didn't go extinct. And they were thought to be upright beings, perhaps, and 8 to 10 foot tall. And if they are a remnant of that, well, that's where they went with. Of course, there's a biblical view of giants in the Bible, and then you've got those people that think they're paranormal. There's a lot of enigma associated with these creatures, which remain unanswered for me, and I stretched out all over the place trying to find what they could possibly be, and I don't know. They are sentient, cognizant thinkers, which is hard for a lot of people to swallow, including the professors I've been around.
Oh, of course.
Because this language thing is only supposed to be for humans. Well, these things aren't human like we are, but they have language. And,
well, of course.
From my experiences up there, all the times we've tried to trick them, I do believe that they are cognizant thinkers. They can figure it out. They may not know exactly what that camera's going to do, but they know that it's not normal. I don't know. My thoughts are they span all the way from giants in the Bible, from Genesis 6:4 to Greek mythology to Gigantopithecus. So. Yes, we had a human sound expert to listen to this, Nancy Logan. She's very qualified to detect sounds. This was in the early 90s when she listened to this. But she claimed there was a male and a female arguing, and that's possibly over some food. All of these sounds, by the way, that you'll be hearing are all made from the same location, the same camp. And this male and female that we've noted here is, we think, arguing over the food. And she thinks the female won, if that's any consolation.
Doesn't surprise me.
Probably Scott Nelson's better qualified to answer that. I've wanted to know all these years he's been working on it. He started in 2008, and he still can't tell me what they were saying, but he says you'll never be able to tell what they're saying until you can sit down with one. He points to a tree and says "ooga" or whatever the tree
of
his
course.
language is. He can tell at the end of each sentence, though, they have a certain sound, and that's common in several languages, I guess, where they make a sound when they're through talking.
Yes, it is. It's common.
He seems to know maybe a couple of them's names, too.
How fascinating.
In the recordings of 72 that you'll hear. The male and female interaction, we call it, I think, it was made, again, by Al Berry in 1972.
Right.
I have ideas. We've had unusual things like that happen. There are lights and different things that we can't explain. I've been reading books on quantum physics, thinking, maybe I can figure something out there. Of course, quantum physics says nothing is real till it's observed, so how do you get your head around that one? But, yeah, we've had lights up there. We've had unusual things, but, again, I try to keep feet on these things because we know they leave tracks instead of wings. But, there's something associated with these beings that could be, I guess some people might call paranormal. I just think it's things we haven't learned about yet. But exactly.
Or supernatural.
Exactly. I've not failed to go up there every year, one way or the other. Last year in 2011, Scott Nelson and I went up there 3 different times, stayed for about a week at a time. He went up there prepared to record 24/7 enough batteries to last forever, I think, and never captured anything. Nothing happened. And I had to wonder when we came out the last time and he left and went back to Missouri where he teaches, if they were still around, because nothing had happened. And I made a decision to go up there by myself, which is thought of very favorably by the other guys, because it's kind of dangerous. And if you got hurt or something happened, there's nobody to help you, and you don't get cell service there. Anyway, I went up there by myself, and the question was answered. They're still around. I went inside this little shelter I had set up, and there was a big crash right outside, a big bang, sounded like a gunshot going off. And that's what they would knock, which I have on my recordings for people to hear. They'll knock on woods, they'll pound on rocks, they do stuff like that. Well, this is what happened right outside this little one-man tent. The shelter's about to fall down from the winter load up there, so I didn't want to sleep in there, and I set up a little tent and went inside. And it was still daylight when this happened, and it kind of jarred me a little bit because it was totally unexpected. And then I heard some chattering going on, and Bigfoot chattering, which was really exciting. But it's also a little frightening when you're by yourself. And I try to make notes.
I would think maybe more than a little, Ron.
Well, yeah, and something banged right outside there on one of those old barrels we took up there years ago on mules, and we're using it for trash now. But then I heard some bipedal walking right out there breathing, and I started yelling at him because I'd gone out earlier when it was still light and started trying to, after that big bang I heard, and told him not to come back and scare me, and they sure enough did that about 10 o'clock. And anyway, that was an exciting night. I didn't get a lot of sleep that night. But I left the next morning because my question had been answered. And the group is still around, I believe. At least what's up there recognizes who I am.
Okay, because
it sounds like they're asking me a question. This is made 2 years after the other sounds you heard were made. And my friend Bill McDowell and I were outside the shelter, and usually they don't interact or come around until you're inside our little shelter. And we were outside, and these things were popping rocks and breaking limbs and whooping back and forth. And this was later on that evening when they started actually talking, I'm going to call it, because they were saying something. I don't know what it was, but I think it was a question directed at me, and that's what you'll hear. That's why I call it a question.
Well, let's...
Well, I don't know. We were cooking our food. We just got into camp about 7:30. They were already at our camp, by the way. I don't know for sure why. I got a story about that in my book, but they were there before we got there. We know that from the signs of the next morning when we looked around. But this real strong interaction came in right after it started getting dark. It was a bright moon that night, too. So that's the night I really got to see one. And very fast, very big, very agile for their size. Also, Bill McGow got to see one that night, too. And that was a long time coming because we really hadn't seen one. I seen going from, well, we got a toilet seat we hauled up there and dug a hole, and it's a ways away from where our stove is. And we were sitting around the stove, and they started banging the toilet seat, and that's when I seen one go from that area down to where another one was yelling down towards the creek. And I seen it going through the trees really fast. And,
what did it look like?
Just huge, big, very agile, very smooth. I don't know how something ran that fast and that smooth through that wilderness like it did, but it did. That's what I say in my book. That's what I say. Just like, if you're used to something, you can do it. But I didn't get a good view of its face. I just couldn't see that well. But it was going from our toilet area down to where the other ones were. I think they were toying with us, and I might mention that. I think these things do toy with you. They don't want to hurt anybody. They're playing. The sound I have on there, which is you'll probably play in a minute, but it was quite compelling that night. It was very exciting, and they came in again the following night too. But this was just prior to deer season, 1974. I might mention too that I have a Facebook page which I get into this. Also a Bigfoot recordings page on Facebook. Oh, just my name, Facebook /Ronald Moorehead, and or Facebook /Bigfoot recordings.
No.
Morehead.
Morehead. Okay. It's not two O's is important.
No, it's not.
Yeah, because if you do two O's, you're going to get 63 people who aren't Ron Moorehead.
I call it Humayapoya. That's what it sounds like to me. I just try to write what I hear.
Yeah.
And, so that's what I call it. And it's just my interaction with these. I was back and forth with them that night, and it was just an exciting night. 74. It was 2 years after the previous sounds. This is when we believe, and according to Scott Nelson, the cryptolinguist, he says that it's the same vocal mechanism that made both sounds from 72 to 74. It's just that it's slowed down. And actually, that's what he had to do to decipher language in here. That's the way the military does it, I guess, the Navy. And he thinks they were slowing down their rapid articulation to communicate, to try to communicate to us. And we don't know what they were saying, again, until we can really have good contact with them and find out what they're trying to tell us. I don't know. That's been my question for 40 years. What are they trying to say? Yeah, he's retired United States Navy in cryptolinguistics. He's very qualified to do this type of study, and he teaches now in Missouri. He teaches Russian and Persian, I think. He teaches foreign languages.
I see.
He's got what they call absolute pitch, which is unique. He can mimic these things. You can't mimic their rapid-fire chatter, but he can mimic their sounds fairly well.
Wow.
He's tried to do that up there a few times, and I think if you can interview him, he might give you some good stories. He's done that quite a bit. He goes out on these outings now, which anyway, he's quite a... I was just back there. We were supposed to speak in Oklahoma, but they got rained out. And so I spent a week with him in Missouri and went into his class. He teaches cadets back there. And anyway, he's very qualified to do this.
Well, good.
It was made on the very same night that the other ones, or the two were, that you previously heard. The samurai, that was coined by actually Matt Moneymaker years ago when he first heard it, because it's got an Oriental fling. The whole evening's events had kind of an Oriental Asian type accent to it. And,
how interesting.
Well, yeah, actually, there's been several people claim that. In fact, one of the professors that works with Scott Nelson at this college is Asian. He's Japanese, and he says that's definitely got an Asian sound to it.
That's absolutely fascinating. I'm just really bowled over by that information.
How did that happen is a good question.
Well, yeah.
How did they get that? It's just kind of an accent they have.
Right. I mean, it suggests that they've traveled pretty far.
Well, at one time in their past, if they came across the land bridge, which that's a big assumption, but that's possible. I've heard the Mayan language. I've been a lot of time down the Yucatan, and the Mayan language has that same fling. And then we found out through their DNA that they came from Mongolia.
Right.
And that was kind of interesting to me.
So it could be very well if they came across the land bridge.
Yeah, you know, when I heard the Mayans speak, I thought, wow, that's really reminiscent of what I've heard up in the Sierras. Yes, there could be. It's kind of a cross between believing that or believing that UFOs are still impregnating human women.
Yeah, well, we can go down any road we want to with this right
you
now.
Can. And are they able to change DNA on people? You can go to any of those roads and elaborate on them. But, yeah, there could be something to that. I just, after all these thousands of years hanging around campfires, watching humans and watching Native Americans and what have you, there's no telling. They got their own language, whatever it is. It's kind of maybe influenced by some of ours because there seems to be English words. I know Curlin's report in '78 when he wrote the book on our sounds had a report in the book, Man Like Monsters on Trial. It shows their language capability goes inside our range, but it also goes outside our range, which gives them great mimicking ability.
Yes, I should say so.
They can speak really low. We also had some sounds sent to Texas A&M. They couldn't do a complete study, but the decibel range was 79. The average human range is 94 to 125. And it's also been suggested that maybe these things can emanate infrasound, which is used by large animals, elephants, giraffes, tigers even use infrasound. That could explain some of the feelings that people say when they have, and I've had those feelings up there where you just get frozen, you can't move, and it's quite unique. Whatever it is, it wasn't fear, it's just something slams you like some force field or something.
Just sort of stops you. Ron,
Well, all of them
Well, they're all in dispute, but I mean, you're an expert.
Well, I'm not an expert. I don't believe in experts. They know everything, and I don't know everything. But I do
no one who wants to go down one of these paths, I agree.
I know Bob Gimlin quite well. The Patterson film, made in 1967, believed to be authentic. There's been so many studies done on that, and the Russians believe it emphatically that it's real. They've studied it a lot, too. I think there's only one other film been studied more, and that's the Kennedy assassination. The film gives a substantial reality to this creature walking Bluff Creek, and I believe it to be real.